Hi, I'm Niveditha Indrajit, and this is In Conversation with Indrajit Rajmohan, my husband, and most importantly, into education. So, hi, thank you for agreeing to talk and have a
Hi.
conversation from two different rooms.
Yeah.
So, we met, we married, then you played football for a year, and then you joined school. How did that come about, and
Yes.
what made you choose go into education?
Well, after I quit the corporate job, I was looking at researching thinking, and as I did my personal research online, I found that a lot of uh, research on those lines was happening in schools, and I was thinking of getting into education at the time. And then a friend of mine, Sangeeta, she was being invited to teach at this alternative school called the Integral School, and I joined her for the open house session, and I liked the concept, and I asked them, and they took me in. So then that's when the journey started in education.
How was your journey the first year, second year? You've been in there for 7 years now. So how did that change for you, and how did that change for the kids, and how did that help you with the kind of research that you
Uh,
wanted to do?
yeah, funnily enough, I'd when I joined, I took it to like a fish to water,
Okay.
and somehow I've always had the idea of getting into education, but it was always somewhere in the back of my mind. I didn't recall all those ideas that I had. Um, yeah, I think in the beginning it was a little difficult. I think um, trying to, because the environment was different. It was free, it was open, it was very quiet, relaxing, and I think that's the kind of uh, that's the kind of environment that learning needs. So especially research-based learning, So uh, I think it took time for me to uh, start thinking, so which I'd never done before. I was only working, so it took time to slow down, stop, look, analyze, and then respond. So it took a month or two for me to adjust. But then it came about pretty quickly, because again, you're working with I was working with kids who were in seventh to ninth grade at the time, so they're young, and there were not a lot of demands mentally on me at the time. So I found it good. It was a good learning uh, training ground, or learning for me at that time to develop further. Further, yeah. For the kids, yeah, I think they were excited seeing a male facilitator. They used to see so many female teachers,
Mm.
so they were excited. And yeah, and I just play football, so somehow that knowledge also came to good use, because those kids were interested in football, and yeah, I was playing with them on the field. And I think for kids, adults playing with them is a big deal. So it means a lot to them. So when I was able to play with them, it really meant a lot to them. So
So you talk a lot about classical education, and I've seen you and one other person who is into education, which I'll not name today, have a lot of conversations, especially when we go to school for Vidur. Um, so can you talk more about how education has been, how it is changing now, and what else is possible in here?
well, education. I think if sometime in the 1800s it changed. because the Industrial Revolution, they wanted more students equipped to handle the machinery, and I think the job market exploded.
Okay.
So they needed more qualified people, and then they, I think those changes just happened. I think the old system, the classical education, was more towards the liberal arts, and I think with the explosion of science, I think they needed a new kind of learning. I think a lot of these institutes, the major institutes, didn't have science education in their curriculum till much later, probably the last century or so. So it just changed. It became more skewed towards the sciences, became more job oriented, and that's how it's been for the last probably let's say close to 100 years. I think 80 to 100 years. I think now things are changing again. I think we are finding that, of course, we're finding that this kind of education that we have right now, that we call mainstream education, is deficient in certain areas, like empathy and soft skills and all that. So I think somewhere there's going to be a return of all the soft skills, or the I would say it's just soft skills. I'd say the liberal arts into education, and I've been working on that front, and I'm a big believer in that.
Okay.
So yeah, I think in future we will see a combination of both.
Okay. What else? What else would you like to see? What else would you like to see in the future of education? Like, that
I'd like to see.
Like Vidur is going to a school
Yeah,
where
I'd like.
there is a lot of research based and there's a lot of learning with exploration and stuff like that. And if things go on that way, where do you see it going, and what else can be done?
I think education shouldn't be fixed into a certain pattern or a curriculum and all that, because life doesn't happen like that. So as you can see now, the job market is changing. I mean, the industries, the new technologies keep coming up, new scenarios keep coming up. Just like with this COVID-19 situation, people are now forced to study at home and work online. So situations will come up, and we need to be able to adapt to every scenario. And so I think education also needs to be able to do that. So I think once you have a fixed curriculum or a fixed way of working, then it's of no use. So I think it needs to be decentralized, and I think it needs to be at the hands of each and every educator, and they can take it in whatever direction they want. Yeah, there are a lot of questions that can be asked about the quality if it is in the hands of each person, each educator. But there can be some minimum basic principles, or standards that someone can develop, and so that all kids are not deficient in some area or the other. So yeah.
See, when you and I studied, I think it was just grade on grade, and then we have to pass out 10th high school, then graduation, post graduation, and things like that. Now there is an alternate, and there's an option to plan the education, not just the 16 years, the way it goes. It can be in a different way. So what do you think would be, like, most parents would have this question, okay, if my kid does not write exams, or if my kid does not pass this, there is a certain fear around it. And then there is this whole exploration going on with the alternate education, where the kid chooses the curriculum, kid chooses the number of subjects that they're going to write in a year. At least that is my understanding based on what I've seen you working around. And also now there is Vidur going to a school where he will probably, his future is based on what his choices are going to be and how he's going to be led. So what is that information that you can give to a parent who may be watching this in today or in the future about children choices? How can one go about breaking ground and allowing the new to seep in?
Well, that's not very easy actually, because everywhere you go, that's the whole, everything is set up that way, right? You get a job, to get a job, you need a degree. To get a degree, you need to clear your school exams. So I think in most cases, you find that this setup is prevalent. So for someone who needs to break that mold and go in his own path, um, it needs something different. I think there are people who do that with sports and music and all, but
Yeah,
again, they are few and far between. Only statistically, I think very few make it big in sports and the either in music or in movies and all that. So what
right.
about the others? We have a large population as well, so it's not easy for everyone to become a tennis player. Or, and football teams have only what, 11 players plus another 10 15 people in the reserves, 20 people. So
Mm.
what will the other prospective players do?
Mm.
So everything is limited, and you have a larger population.
Mm.
So yeah, it's not easy. I think most people would end up in following that set pattern, getting a
Okay.
job somewhere, and then perhaps pursuing what they want to do on the side.
Mm.
Yeah. Um, at this moment, I don't see uh, a way out for, uh, I mean, a proper way in which people can, avoid exams and then go into an alternate route. Because I can't speak about that because I've never done it myself.
Right.
Uh, I don't know what it is like to not have a degree, and but I'm sure those people are much more free.
Mm.
I did have a landlord in the UK who studied only up to 8th grade,
Mm.
and then he became a very successful businessman.
Mm.
And he had an embroidery business. They would stitch logos onto jackets, and he made a lot of money, and he bought a lot of property. And
Mm.
then when he had retired once, we were having dinner, and then my German flatmate was talking about how popular Indian food is in Germany. And then my landlord immediately jumped and said, "I'd like to visit Germany and perhaps start an Indian restaurant over there."
Ah.
So then I felt that I just finished my masters then, and I felt that I just felt that wow, he's so open-minded, and I'm so constrained, and I just you're because you've done your masters in biotechnology, you're sort of forced to get work in biotechnology, and you're limiting your options.
Mm.
So I think people uh, who don't go through a formal education probably will be more open-minded and take more risks in life. Perhaps I think
Interesting.
that I can say.
So how do you find
Yeah.
yourself, like you know yourself when you just graduated out and you know yourself after so many years? What has changed then and today?
Mm.
How different are you today from that guy who graduated? What has changed?
Well, yeah, I'm definitely more mature. I used to tell stupid things, but then I think even at work I was not very mature. I think I was not very smart. I was not thinking much. I was just doing the job that was given. I did it very well, and but there was a deficiency when it comes to general thinking. So I think with being in school, slowing down, and with the work I've done in school, I think the skills that I've worked on myself and with the kids, I think there's a big difference in how I look at things and my perspective, looking at things from multiple perspectives. Big difference, yeah.
So can I ask you questions about, do you have any personal, I won't say a hobby, but personal quest to learn something? Or what do you seek in life? What are the 2-3 things that make you happy as an individual, irrespective of what, maybe like even typecasting you as a guy or a married man or a father, or keeping all that aside, as you as an individual, choosing to make yourself happy, what makes you really happy? Doing what? Is there anything like that?
Yeah, I think what I've understood is whatever makes you happy is a place where you don't have any ego.
Okay.
So there are no expectations and there are no ideas that you have in your head that you should be so and so. So I do have some areas. I think education is one of them, and where it is just pure, passion for learning, passion for knowledge. I think, yeah. So I think a place where you don't have ego is a hobby or whatever we call it, activity that you undertake, which doesn't involve ego, is the best for you. It could be anything. For me, I have personally also, I practice martial arts. I know that in martial arts class also, there's no ego that we have, and that's why we're able to learn so well and we enjoy. And football also same thing. It's just, I just love the game. So I did with football, when it came to tournaments, I did have this thing that, okay, I might look stupid in front of other people when playing. So that fear is there, and I don't enjoy that element so much, but just because I love the game so much, yeah, it overrides it, and I just enjoy being on the field. So yeah, anywhere where you don't have an ego to hold you back and you can really enjoy yourself, that is what you should follow. So for some people, it's social service. For some people, it is cooking. For some people, I don't know, there could be so many activities. So, but whenever there is no I involved in that, I think it's perfect for anyone. So,
on that note, thank you for having this conversation with me. Is there anything else you'd like to speak about? A question that I've not asked, perhaps?
I don't know how many minutes have we covered?
It doesn't matter. I mean, I just want to know if there is anything else. Like, see, I may not have asked you a question, and there could be a topic that you would like to talk about, so this is the chance to have a conversation about that. If there is any such thing that you would like to actually say out for somebody to find, and it will be helpful for them. I don't know.
Oh, yeah, perhaps with more about education, I think you can ask some questions if you have any. Yeah. Any questions if you have.
So tell me about the facilitation you would do about math. I know I've sat in a couple of your classes where you talked about how would you approach math? How would you approach the subject when you're talking to your kids? I know you've been reading some books which are difficult to read. I mean, I get to hear bits and pieces from, because I don't come to sit in your class, but I do get to hear from you on and off that we are doing this so in that context, I found this very amusing as to why you would pick a very difficult book to read and read through that, and what is that you would like to achieve? What was that activity about?
Oh, that's not to do with, no, but that's not to do with math. That was a separate reading program.
Okay.
So I have two math resource people that I interact with, who sort of guide me on how to go about math work.
Okay.
And so one day because I was looking at getting into logic what 2-3 years ago, and then one of the resource people had given me a book. Sent me a book online called The Uses of Argument by Stephen Tolman, and I found that book. I read it. I read it the wrong way, so I was trying to get snippets out of it that I could use some practical knowledge.
Mm.
But it was in a narrative form, and it was written like how Shashi Tharoor would write
Okay.
or would speak, and then it
Okay.
didn't make sense to me. And then I spoke to him, and he said he intentionally reads such difficult books so that it improves his thinking. And uh, he said complex minds, the greatest minds have always had complex minds,
Okay.
and the only way we can interact with them is through their works, their books.
Okay.
And so then I devised this program for my students, wherein we take a great book, and that's in classical education also they have this program called Great Books,
Okay.
but that was more geared towards Greek authors,
Mm-hmm.
and probably the 16th, 17th, 18th century classical literature, English literature. But I just wanted to take some books that were accessible, but at the same time not too easy to read, and that we could, and with ideas where we could discuss, uh, take them and discuss them in class, and uh, develop them, develop our thinking. So these books are, I mean, you need reading and you need discussions.
Okay.
Without them, it's useless. So without the discussions, it's useless. It's going to be just plain knowledge. But with the discussions, you have each student thinking, playing with the idea in their heads, looking at it from different perspectives. You hear different perspectives from different people, and then that's when it becomes fluidic thinking. It's not crystalline thinking. It's not
Mm.
solid. And when you have a difficult book, you have difficult ideas to deal with.
Mm.
It's not easy, but it's good.
Yeah.
So I think one book, I think some authors that come to mind, like that we worked on, were like Ralph Waldo Emerson.
Mm.
His language is pretty complex for 16, 17-year-olds to read.
Okay.
Henry David Thoreau's we read Walden. I think Walden is a very good book to start off with.
Mm.
Then I think there are so many other authors that one can look at. Thomas Paine, Arthur Schopenhauer, and a lot of philosophers and all that. And it's very interesting when you discuss these ideas in class. You get to see how the kids respond to these ideas. And of course, you get them to write a one-page summary as well. So that
Okay.
involves writing down a single page of
Mm.
what they understood and what their idea was of it. I didn't want a summary of the text. That would just be paraphrasing, but I wanted a summary of their ideas and what they took away from each text. So that's I really enjoyed that reading program. Yeah.
See, there's a lot of competition that comes into play, or competitive exams and competitive stuff. And then there is this whole gamut about learning. How does one balance, or how does one educate a lot of adults, especially when they want to have children explore a lot more? Uh, what can be done over there? What kind of conversations or
What's your
what kind of awareness can be had over there?
What's your question exactly?
See, a lot of parents, or at least that I know of, like when you look at the regular education, uh,
Okay.
Shakti also has something to say about education.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah.
what I was talking about is there's a lot of sense of competition, and even the kids
Mm-hmm.
feel like, oh, I'd like to have this or that, and I should top the rank, or go in that direction.
Yeah.
And then there is this whole uh, knowledge about stuff and learning that also comes into picture.
Yeah.
How do you balance while learning, while really pursuing something, even for a kid to get that? support?
Yeah, I think the competition is natural. It exists in nature, but I think for us, it needs facilitation, especially on the parents' part. I think parents need to understand what competition is and how it can affect their child.
Mm.
Um, I should start from there because that's where I was raised. So I can compete, but it doesn't um, affect me so much because my mom would tell me, keep me aware of the idea of competition, and not to get sucked into it.
Mm.
So I think that is a very important lesson that she taught me, that you can be there, but you need not be really sucked into that whole competitive world.
Yeah.
And from what I heard from one of my colleagues who had spoken to one of the parents at our school, the parent told them that like we are we are taught to compete and our for our entire time in education, and then when we get to work, we are expected to collaborate.
Mm.
And that's when people can't do that because
Yeah.
they're still competing for the increment and competing for the promotions.
Yeah.
And when they are expected to collaborate, they can't do that. So yeah, so that's a problem over there actually.
How do you think the education
Yeah.
system can incorporate collaboration at a very young level while also giving an understanding of what competing is about and the nature of excelling?
Yeah, I think competition in with exams and all is rubbish. I think you can't compete with how much knowledge you have. I think that's really stupid, and I think that's the problem lies over there. Competition is good for things like sports, where you spurs you on to do better, and uh, that stays on the field more or less. Though it can spill out to the classroom, but again, that needs facilitation. And but competition is best for outdoor act for the field, for sports. You know, so there should not be any competition. There should not be any competition in the classroom. So I think schools change the way they work and stop this grading nonsense and all that. I think yeah, things will change for the better. You can't compete with how much knowledge a person has and all that. In that aspect, it's just not insane.
So do you think
And I think they could introduce. I just finished. They need to introduce group projects also.
okay.
And the thing is that schools can introduce a lot of lot of activities, but for them, for the student, exams takes precedence because they are judged on how well they fare the exams.
Mm.
So a nice way of understanding collaboration is working in groups,
Okay.
but usually the group project just gets a grade and nobody cares about that grade. People care about how much you score in the exams.
Mm.
So at least in our school, when we were working, group projects were important, as important as individual projects. And of course, we didn't have any grading system as such.
Mm.
So kids could learn, and even in the group project, they could really collaborate,
Mm.
and they learn all those skills of collaboration, empathy, getting organized, being responsible for your own work, when you're part of a team. So they could learn all those skills being part of a group project. But in a mainstream school, as long as they have that exam mode of working, no one's going to care about a group project. They'll just push it away on the corner, and it'll just be a sham. So yeah.
So I saw you reading a book called Psychic Education, which talks about mind, body. Can you talk a
Yeah,
little more about what that book is about and what one can consider while?
I can't talk much about that book. I can't talk much about that book because I didn't read much of it. We used
Okay.
to read that in school, I think. That's the only time I ever read it. I read a little bit. It's a fantastic book. When you just flip through the pages and you see, it's a great book actually. It's a very practical resource for alternative educators. And I think, yeah, I haven't really followed a book when it came to my style of working in school. I
Okay.
just like to get into it very intuitively. And I do have some principles in place, but I never follow that book as in, no, I should do it according to that book, which is why I
Okay.
never read much of it anyway. So, yeah, I didn't want to get
So
stuck
you
to
have
some
been
rules.
radically explorative and intuitive as far as your actions were concerned when you worked with kids and it went with the flow.
Yeah, I had my own ideas in place. And like I said, some principles are there as to how you treat the kid, and awareness. Awareness is the key. Being aware of how they are, who they are, how do they feel at this moment, how are they responding to you, how are you responding to their questions, uh, how are you responding to their answers. um, I think awareness is the key, and if you have the principles in place as to how to treat a child with respect, and all that, and you have a plan in place, not plan, sorry, you have a goal in place that you want them to understand a concept or something, then I think you can use your creativity, and it'll all come. Your creativity and your the ideas and everything will come in place, and you can do what you need to do with the child. So I don't think you really need a book to tell you what to do. It's a good reference. You can read a book at home as a good reference for some ideas, but for me that is secondary. A book is secondary. So
Okay.
yeah.
So thank you for speaking to me. Is there anything else you would like to say, or do we close here?
Um, yeah, yeah. I'm leaving education right now, getting back into the corporate world. Um, Unfortunately, educators don't get paid enough. But yeah, it's been a great time. It's been, I think, being an alternative education, I've been very lucky. And yeah, I think there's a lot that needs to be done. I think alternative education needs to be the mainstream education. And who knows? I think hopefully one will happen one day, but I don't know. At this current state, we don't know how it will be, but
So
let's
if
see.
you had the ideal
We can work on
magic, if you had the ideal magic wand to make it happen, what would you be doing ideally?
do what actually.
Like if you want to change the phase of the education in alternate world, and if you see, oh, it's not going to happen right away, but there are hurdles around it. If you had a magic wand and rectified everything into making it mainstream or making it, what would that be like?
Yeah, then perhaps all the people would wake up, and I think people can be awake, but I think the problem is they're not willing to let go. Yeah, they're worried of what will happen if the entire thing just collapses on its head.
Hmm.
All these IIT coaching centers and all the businesses,
Hmm.
that run in keeping that system in place. I think people don't want to see it crumble. How will companies hire people who don't have degrees and all that? I think the way of thinking, if I had a magic wand, I think I'd make people braver to sort of, be brave enough to let those things crumble and then look at uh, education
Something
in a new
new.
way and how it should be seen. So, yeah.
Yeah. So thank you very much for this conversation.
You're welcome.